Hi and welcome to part 2 of this tutorial, which is all about creating and properly aligning custom bone shapes in Blender. If you missed part 1, please watch it. It's a bit theoretical, but it's highly recommended. Understanding the theory will allow us to do this part really quickly. Link to part 1 will be in the description. Okay, I'm going to work with this character, which is already rigged. You can download the same blend file as I'm using. Link will be in the video description. Or you can work with your own rigged model. Either way, I think you'll be able to follow along. I have to tell you about the license of this model. I got it from opengameart.org, which is a nice resource for open source 3D models. This was the original model. It was also edited by this person and also me. I did tweak the rig quite a lot. Everything you need to know about the license will be in this text area here. Please read it and then you can close this text area. Cool. So we have this model which is already skinned and weighted to these bones. We have control bones on layer 0. So that those are bones that will be animated and controlled by the animator, the user. Because this rig is quite simple, some of the control bones are also deformation bones, for example these spine bones here. And also we have pure deformation bones on layer 8 over here. So these bones will never be touched by the animator, so we can leave them alone. And so we only have to create custom bone shapes for these bones on layer 0. So a lot of these bones here will need to be approached with the same technique that I showed you in part 1. And this is by far the most difficult task when it comes to custom bone shapes. If you remember, that's the case where you want very precise placement of your custom shape, but your bones and your custom objects have very different orientations. So here we'll start with the difficult stuff, and then at the end I'll show you a few other examples which are also very common, but they are quite a bit simpler. Okay, first let's say that we want a custom widget for this shoulder armor over here. The first thing that we'll need is a mesh object that will serve as a custom shape. And we have to visually place it here in this area where we want it to appear as a bone shape. So of course, we could go to object mode and create a new mesh and model it. But often it's simpler to just use the shape of our existing character. So I could select the character, go to edit mode and select some of these edge loops of the shoulder armor. So this whole edge loop all around and then this loop down the middle of the armor. And then I'm going to press Shift D, duplicate it, S to scale it up a bit. I see that I have activated X-axis mirror, so I'm going to undo, uncheck X mirror, and then I'm going to scale up this bone. Move it a little bit so it's easily visible above the actual shape of the character. Now I want to make it into a separate mesh, so with this shape selected, I'm going to press P and choose selection. Now my shape is a separate model. And that gave us a good looking custom shape very quickly. I can go to object mode and switch to this new model, and maybe I want to edit it a little bit more. I don't need all these vertices here. Something like that. And this shape is almost ready to use. However, because we got it from this rigged character, it did inherit a lot of its properties, and many of them we don't actually need. I don't want this shape to be parented to the armature, so I'm going to press Alt P and choose Clear and Keep Transformation. I'm going to get rid of the armature and delete all vertex groups. And that's it. Then I can rename it, just press F2. It's common to give widgets the prefix of WGT dash. So WGT shoulder armor .L. By the way, if you're going to use this shape extraction technique that I just showed you many times over and over, you may just want to create a full copy of your character. Get rid of the armature modifier, Alt P, Clear and Keep Transform, delete all vertex groups, and then you're going to use this new model to extract your shapes. I'm not going to do this here, so I'm going to delete this duplicated model. Now that we have our shape, we have to go through the steps we outlined in the previous videos. First, I want to visualize the axis for my bones. So I'm going to select my armature, go to Object Data Properties, and tick Axis on the viewport display. And for my object, I want to display its object axis. So under Object Properties, Viewport Display, tick Axis for this custom shape, for the shoulder armor widget. Now the axis of this widget is in the center of the world. I want to move it at the base, at the head of this bone, and align the orientation of this custom shape with the orientation of the bone. In the previous video, I showed you how to do this using the 3D cursor, but actually it might be easier to use snapping. But first I'm going to activate Affect Only Origins. Alright, and now I want to switch to vertex snapping. As always, I keep snapping off and I just press Ctrl when I need to snap something. So now I'm going to press G to move and then hold Ctrl. And now I was able to snap my pivot to the bone, but it was also snapping to the vertices of this model. So if you prefer, you can hide this model temporarily. Okay, I placed the pivot over here for the sake of aligning this object pivot point with the orientation of the bone. And the problem that I'm currently experiencing is that this object gizmo is very, very large. And there is no way to control the size of this gizmo from the interface options. So what we could do is press S to scale the gizmo until it's the right size. And then I'll start aligning the origins. I'll align it from front view, side view, and top view. And then repeat the same process once or twice. Okay, and that's looking good to me. Now I can move the pivot, hold Ctrl until it snaps to the head of the bone. And then very importantly, I have to press Alt S to return the pivot or the size of this bone, the scale of this bone, to a state of 111. If I press Ctrl Z, you'll see that because I scaled this gizmo down, this was reflected here in the scale properties. So I'll press Alt S. Okay, and now my bone is completely ready to be applied as a custom shape. I'm going to select this bone, pose mode, select the actual bone, go to the bone tab, custom shape, and look for WGT shoulder armor. As you see, there are other widgets in this scene already. I'll tell you about them in a second. Now, when I applied my shape, you'll see that the alignment is looking good, but the size of the shape is not right. And that is because currently we have scale to bone length option on. And that takes the length of the bone into account when it calculates the size of this widget. Instead, we want to uncheck this option, and that will make the size of this widget exactly the size of the object that we used. That is something that I didn't explicitly say in the previous video, so please keep that in mind. Okay, so we aligned this shape with the left shoulder armor. On the other side, we need an exact mirror image of this shape. And it would be nice if there was a way to create this kind of mirror image, but I did try a lot of things and I couldn't find a perfect solution. So what I would do is select my existing shape, Shift D and duplicate it, and I should uncheck Affect Only Origins for a second. Okay. And now there are a bunch of ways to create a mirror image of this shape, but for all of them we need to make sure that our rotation and location are applied. So I'm going to press Ctrl A and just choose all transforms. Okay, now we can use a mirror modifier, for example, but I prefer to go to edit mode, select all vertices with A, and now you can press spacebar or F3 depending on your keys and look for symmetrize, mesh symmetrize, and choose, in my case, plus X to X. Okay, now we have a mirror image on the other side. I'm going to press Alt-A, then I'm going to select all of these vertices and delete them. Right, this gives me a good shape on the other side, but the alignment is still not good, so we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to, again, manually align this bone. So, tick Affect Only Origins. Let's hide the dwarf. Move the pivot point to the tail of the bone. Scale the pivot down, and then try to align these two pivots as best as you can. Front view, top view, side view. Okay, this is looking fairly good. I'm going to press Alt-S and then G to move and hold Control and snap it to the head of the bone. Then I can go to my armature. Actually, let's rename this shape to shoulderarmor.r. You can do it over here in the outliner or press F2. So go to the armature, select your bone tab, and select the shoulderarmor.r. Again, untick scale to bone length, and that's it. So this is the exact technique that I showed you in part 1, but in a practical setting. So I think now you see better how this process works. So we could use the same technique for the rest of the bones. If you want to practice, you're welcome to do so. But I'm going to make my life easier, and I'm going to use the add-on that I showed you in part 1. It is this add-on. Again, I'm going to make sure that to put a link in the description of the video. You just have to install and activate this add-on as I showed you in part 1. Okay, let's unhide the character. Go to object mode, and I'm also going to unhide this collection called widgets over here. And as you can see, let's hide out the other stuff. As you can see, it contains a bunch of shapes that I prepared. I did give them a random location and orientation so that you can practice. I want to save some time, but I don't want to make it too easy for you. So let's untick Affect Only Origins, unhide our models, and I want to put these widgets in the widgets collection. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the access display from these widgets because it's distracting me. So if I have them selected and just alt-click here, it will disappear. Okay, let's select this head gizmo. If I just place it on X0, it will be right in the center, and then I'll, in front view, move it down a little bit until it's aligned with the character. Something like that is looking good. So now I'm going to shift select the armature, go to pose mode, select my head bone, right click and choose set and align bone shape. And as you saw in part 1, this just aligns our custom shape perfectly with a single click. Cool. For the rest of these shapes, I'm going to actually first visually align them where I want them to be. So the leg will be somewhere in this area. This may be a little bit hard to understand, but this is the control for the toe. So I'm going to put the origin in the center to make it easier to control. Or I can also go to edit mode and edit it like this. It really doesn't matter. What I'm doing here is I'm aligning these shapes visually. I don't care about origins and orientations. Something like that. I want to turn off the in-front option for this armature for a second because it's making my work harder. It's making it harder to see what I'm doing. This thing here controls these side armors, which are controlled by this bone. These things are not automated, so when you move the character's legs, leg, you may have to adjust this. If you want to learn about automating your rigs, you may like my advanced Rigify series and the Ogre session in particular, where I show how to automate not only a bunch of props like these ones, but also how to create simple muscle simulations by automating a bunch of bones. We also create this automation of the belly using drivers and so on. If you're interested, check it out. Link will be in the description. So let's undo and go back to our character. I want to, again, visually align this shape. Something like that. And this will be the control for the hand and arm. So I want to place it somewhere like this. And that's it actually. These are the shapes that will be aligning with this technique. The rest will be done with a slightly different technique. So here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to select all of these shapes and press Ctrl J to join them into a single shape. Then I'll press Ctrl A and choose all transforms. Then I'll go to edit mode, select all vertices and symmetrize. Positive X to minus X. And again, with all of these vertices and edges selected, I'll press P and choose Buy Loose Parts. This will make each part of this mesh that we used to have a separate object. The downside of this technique that I just used is that I lost the proper naming of all of these widgets that I have. So I'll need to rename them manually. Okay, I renamed my shapes properly. Now I'm going to select my rig, tick in front again, so I can see my bones. And then I actually don't need my bone axis anymore because the add-on that I'll be using does all of the aligning of the bones automatically. So I'm going to untick it. And then I'm going to start applying these shapes one by one. So select the shape, shift select the rig, pose mode, select the bone, right click, set and align. Select another shape, shift select the rig, pose mode, select the bone, set and align. Okay, and I'll just keep doing that. So this shape, I want to actually assign to the IK control over here. This is the IK control, leg ik.l, and I'm going to press set and align. Same on the other side. Toes, set and align. And as you can see, that was very, very quick. I still have to assign the hand widgets actually. Let's select the widget, shift select the rig, pose mode, and I want to assign this shape to this IK, arm IK bone. So set and align. Over here, same thing. Cool. And now if I go to pose mode, I can just select my widgets and move my character. And that's awesome. I think you can see how fast and precise working with this add-on is. Okay, as I said earlier, let's now do some easy stuff. I stopped the recording and I updated some of the widgets in the scene, but you will have these updated shapes so we can keep working. All of these remaining shapes here are aligned with the world. If I select any of them and look under item, rotation is set to 0, 0, 0. So one of the simplest situations is when we need to assign a custom shape to a bone that is also aligned with the world. Like the root bone, for example. I'm going to turn axis on for the bones in the armature tab. And as you can see, this root bone here is aligned with the world. Okay, this situation is very easy because it is very simple to align an object with the world. Most of the time that is what you get by default. Or if you need to, You can just select your object, Control A, and choose rotation. And that will apply the rotation. And if you use an object that is aligned with the world as a shape for a bone that is also aligned with the world, then things just work. So, select the armature, go to pose mode, and in the bone tab, I'm going to set the custom object to WGT root, which is this bone with the pointy arrows in it. And as you can see, I just chose it and it's perfectly aligned. I didn't need to do anything special. You can tweak the size if you want to, but it looks good to me, so we can move on. Another simple and common case is assigning a spherical widget like this one here. Because the sphere kind of looks the same from any angle, I can assign it to any bone I want and it will look kind of okay. So here I'm going to use the sphere widget as a shape for the pole targets. The pole targets are these bones here that control the orientation of the elbows and knees. So I'm going to select all of them and choose the WGT sphere. Here the bone length option is on and that looks good to me, so I'm going to keep it that way. However, the shape was only really set for the active object. But if I just right click on the custom object field and choose copy to selected, then the same shape will be copied to all other selected bones. This is a little trick that you can use not just here but in many areas of Blender. I actually didn't know this function until recently, but a member of our Discord group showed it to me. I'm going to link to his Instagram where he posts his animations. Also feel free to join us on Discord where you can learn cool stuff like that. Okay, another very common and fairly simple thing to do is to align a custom shape with the lengthy part of a bone, if that makes sense. Every bone has a direction, starting from the thick part of the bone and going up towards the thin part of the bone. And the local axis that points in this direction is always the y-axis. As you can see here, the y-axis of this bone points in the direction of the bone, here as well, and anywhere we look, you're going to see this pattern. In other software, you may actually be able to manually set this axis, but in Blender, it's always the y-axis. So when you need a shape for such a bone, all you need to do is make sure that the y-axis of the custom object is pointing up. Here we have the circle. I'm going to activate axis under object properties, and as you can see, the Z is pointing up. Let's turn on in front for the rig again and go to pose mode, select the first spine bone. This one is the pelvis bone, this is the first spine bone. And I'm going to choose the circle, the WGT circle, as a custom shape. And as you can see, the alignment of the shape is not what we want. I want the circle to be like this, to go around the waist of my character. So I'm going to go back to my circle, under Tool, activate effect on the origins, and I want to rotate 90 degrees on the x-axis, and that will make the y-axis point up. And as you can see, that also aligned my shape as I wanted. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and now it is properly set up. Then I could select all of these bones of the spine and neck. Shift select this bone which has the custom object set up, and again right click and choose copy to selected, and also on the scale copy to selected. Okay, these shapes for the neck need to be made a little bit bigger, or you could even give them a completely different custom shape if you wanted to. It's up to you. I'm going to keep it like this. Now I want to set up the pelvis, and I want to give it the square shape. So look for square, and again we get this bad alignment. I'm going to go to object mode, I don't actually have to activate axis under viewport display because when I have the affect only origins option on, we get this special gizmo in the viewport. So again, I'm going to rotate 90 degrees on the x-axis, and that will align my pelvis shape. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and that's it. Okay, now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the fingers. For the fingers, I'm going to use this spatula looking object. And by the way, the fingers that I have set up here behave the same way as in Rigify. Rotating rotates the whole finger, and scaling curls the finger. Okay, I'm going to select this thumb and give it the finger widget, and the alignment will be bad. So all I need to do is go to the finger widget and rotate on the X 90 degrees. And here we can see that the finger widget is nicely aligned. Okay, I won't need the affect only origins option on anymore, so I'm going to turn it off. Okay, now if I select all fingers, also on the other side, just the fingers, and then shift select this thumb, and again right click and choose copy to selected, then all of them will become this shape. Now here is something very important. For all of these fingers, the scale is set to 1 and scale to bone length is on. If I switch to edit mode, you'll notice that the length of this custom shape is exactly the length of the bone. If I make this bone, for example, a little bit longer and go to object mode or pose mode, then this custom shape will become exactly as the length of this bone. To get this behavior, there are a few things that you need to do. First, as I just pointed out, scale should be set to 1 and scale to bone length option should be on. And then for your actual custom object, you have to make sure that it is exactly 1 unit long. So we have to look under dimensions, not scale, but dimensions, and make sure that the value for the y-axis is exactly 1, and also that the y-axis is pointing up. And that will give you this shape that always runs along the length of the bone, and also it is exactly as long as your bone. Okay, and with that we are actually ready to wrap things up. One thing that you could do is give your custom shapes colors as well, using bone groups. So I'm going to turn off in front and then expand bone groups. I need to go to pose mode in order to use this feature. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I did cover bone groups in my Rigify course, and I'm going to link to the video where I talk about bone groups. But anyway, the basic workflow is that you add a bone group with this plus sign, name it whatever you like. So I'm going to need props, for example, and then give it some sort of color. Let's choose the purple for the props. And then you select the objects that are going to receive this color and click assign. Okay, I'm going to speed through this process. You can do what I do, or you can choose your own colors. Okay, I gave my custom shapes colors that kind of make sense to me. For the limbs on the left and right side, I did something special. I assigned red color to all of the limbs on the left side and blue on all of the widgets for the right side. And I got this idea from Luciano. His YouTube channel is The Adventures of LollypopMan, and I highly recommend it. He has a series on Rigify, and he shares a lot of tips about rigging and animation. So check out his videos. Okay, another good practice and that is also something that I learned from Luciano, if I'm not mistaken, is to unify these colors that you have here. So the first color here is the default color for this group. The second one is when the bone is selected, and the last one is for when this bone is active. And it's a good idea to unify the selected and active color. So right now these colors are locked. If you want to change them, you need to switch to custom color set, and that will unlock them. So here I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give you the exact RGB and hex values that you can use for these colors. Okay, I also made the default color for my widgets much brighter, which makes it easier to see in my opinion. And then if you select any of them, you'll see that they become this light blue color regardless of their default color. And that makes it easier to see what is actually selected and active. Alright, and now at the end, I want to cover this override transform feature that we haven't really covered yet. It is a feature that you're going to use very rarely, but when you do need it, it is very, very useful. So here I have the hand widget selected, and if I set override transform to, let's say, the head, you'll see that this widget jumped in the area of the head. And now if I move the head, it will kind of move with it. And if I select it and press G, for example, it will kind of move the hand as normally, but it will stay at the head. And as you can probably feel, this is a completely nonsensical example. So let's give an example where this actually makes sense. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo. And I can't demonstrate this feature properly on the dwarf. So I'm going to hide it. And I'm going to hide all of these widgets except for this one, which I also just added to the scene, but you will have in your scene. And then I'm going to create a new single bone, make it longer, right click and subdivide it a bunch of times. Then I'm going to go to pose mode, select the first bone, then the second one, press Ctrl Shift C and choose copy rotation. Under the bone constraints, I'm going to choose local space to local space, and then I'm going to select all of these remaining bones and then the second bone and choose pose constraints, copy constraints, and that copied this same constraint to all bones except for the first one. So basically what happens here is that the rotation of the first bone will be copied by all of the other bones, and the effect that it has is this automatic curving of the whole chain, which is often used in stuff like tails, tentacles, and stuff like that. Okay, so now if I place this widget over here, maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller and apply the scale. And now I'm going to use the add-on to align this widget with this bone. And now if I rotate it, it still has the same effect. But having this widget over here at the base of this tail or whatever it is, it's not really bad, but it is not extremely intuitive either. It would be nice if this widget was at the end of the chain. So let's go to object mode and move this widget all the way up, and then select the armature, go to pose mode, and with this bone selected, right click and choose align bone shape. And that will make this shape appear at the end of the chain. But then if I rotate it, you'll see that it lags behind the actual movement of this chain quite a lot. And so again, it is not very intuitive. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to move this shape back to the base of the chain, or in other words, it will be again aligned with the first bone. And then I'll switch to the bone tab, and for override transform, I want to choose this bone, which is bone 001. So select it, and the widget will jump at that position. And now if I rotate, the widget will be sticking to this last bone of the chain. and that makes this widget very intuitive to use. So that's it. With this, I think we really covered everything there is about custom bone shapes. I showed you all of the common problems that I am aware of, and I showed you my personal best solution for them. And we even covered some really rare cases like using this override transform option. Thank you for sticking until the end of the video. Make sure to click like and subscribe, all of that good stuff. Enable notifications so that you get notified when I release the new video. And that's it. See you in the next one.